touching on the point of, you know, where you're a VFX producer and you're being called up by a production company to potentially come on board to pitch on a project, or they may have already, you know, selected you because they like your reel and they really want to work with you, but they need some costings and ideas on how to actually, you know, execute the visual effects on their show. So you have this initial meeting, and again, this is based on experience on several shows that, you know, I've worked over the years, and, you know, and also clients that I've met that that have come into these meetings, not necessarily won the job, but, you know, struck up a good relationship for the next job. So here's a few tips I'd like to run by you, existing producers or people that are looking to get into production. And the first few tips are, I'm not going to go through all of them because this PDF is actually available to you all to download as part of your class. But, you know, the main one is pretty much assess the project to see whether it's a good fit for your studio and current resources. Now, of course, you know, most studios will want to say yes to every job. You never say no to a job. You know, you never turn it down unless you have a really good reason. And these reasons are usually because you just don't have the resources to do it. And it's actually a really good practice to be in that sort of way of thinking where, you know, you've got like, I don't know, 10 artists in your studio, for example, and you're completely flat out working on this project, and he gets other project offered to you. You know, a lot of producers will tend to think, well, let's just try and cram it in there to make the extra money. And, you know, and I think a good experience that I've had in the past where I've tried to do that and, you know, failed miserably because, you know, the quality suffers on both projects, or the quality suffers on the project you're currently delivering. And clients are clients, and no matter how big or small they are clients, and they're very important. And therefore, you know, you want to do a good job regardless if it's a small project or a big project. So when you do get this initial meeting with the client, the first thing you do, just assess if it's, you know, if it fits your studio, for the reasons I've just said. Also, assess the project whether this is something you want to develop your studio pipeline or portfolio. For example, you may be a studio that does a lot of motion graphics, right? You do really great motion graphics, but you really want to like get into some visual effect shots, because mainly, you know, maybe a lot of the motion graphics you do end up being handed over to VFX companies who then composite into the screens or heads-up displays and so on, and you want to be able to do that as part of the offering your studio do. Or you may want to boost your team's animation skills or animation offering, or things like characters. Of course, it's a risk for a client to try out a studio that's never done that before. So if this is something you really want to push a studio and you see this as an opportunity to get your studio on the map in terms of, like, you know, proof that you can do this type of work, then you pretty much have to do a test. And tests are usually something that a studio would invest in. Clients would very, very, very rarely a client would pay for a test to be done. So you know, you've got to invest some time in doing that as a studio. But as we all know, studios, you know, need to make a living, and they don't really have a lot of cash flow around unless you're a massive studio. So, you know, you basically do that outside of office works or outside of studio time, or you bring in a VFX supervisor or talent that has that level of work in their portfolio, and then you kind of use that as your demo test. So there are different ways of doing that. And of course, you present your team's show reel and your VFX supervisor and producer's credit list and so on. So that's kind of like the first thing you do when you get the first meeting. Now, a lot of people ask me as well, is that, well, what sort of questions do we ask when we first meet a production company for the first time? I'll tell you one thing you shouldn't ask right away. Even though it's quite an important question, you shouldn't really start that as your opening question. It's like, you know, how much money do you have? I know it's quite an obvious one, but you know, if you're a VFX company that's trying to break into doing the bigger films, or just doing film work, you'd want to get that relationship going first. And you know, the first thing you want to start off is like, just ask them, what is the target audience of the film? You know, if they haven't given you too much details about it, you know, is it film, feature film? Is it broadcast, episodic type work? Is it video on demand type work? You know, where it's going onto Netflix or Amazon and so on. These things matter because this will give you a good idea of the type of project it is and the type of schedule you would have, and also kind of give you an idea of the budget range it would have. Also, what is the budget type of the project? So this is where, you know, you don't ask how much money you've got, you just ask, what is the type of budget? Is this a micro budget? Is this a low budget? Is this indie, or is this a studio movie? And of course, if it's a studio movie, you would know, you should be talking to the likes of Warner Brothers and Fox and so on. But it's a good way to like break the ice in terms of asking the dreaded question, how much money do you have? And also, another good question is, how locked is the script? Because obviously they'll send you a script and they'll ask you to read it, and they'll ask you sometimes to do a quick breakdown. So it's good to ask, how locked is the script? If it's a script that's kind of like a really first draft script and there's a lot of rewrites, then don't invest too much time in trying to do a really detailed breakdown or a big massive pitch, because that could easily change. But of course, the essence of the story will still be the same. Also, ask when are they looking to shoot principal photography, and where they're looking to shoot. So when they're shooting is very important, so it gives you an idea of when this sort of job could potentially start, so you can look at your schedule, your studio schedule, what projections in terms of jobs that are coming in and so on, and availability of resources. Also, another thing is, when are they looking to release the movie? Now usually movies, if it's an independent film, then they might be going through some like pre-sales, and they might not have a distributor yet, and that will affect the release of the movie. And if it's a TV show, you ask when the transmission date is, and again that could be a similar thing as well. But it's worth asking those things. And also, these are good first initial meeting questions to ask, because that then starts striking a conversation between you and the potential client. Other questions worth asking while you're in that meeting is, ask to see any concept art and mood boards that are done during pre-production. It's a 50-50 thing. Sometimes you'll get a production company that just got a script. They just want to, they've just got a script greenlit and it's a really good writer, but don't have any production art. Maybe they're asking you to get involved in providing some visual effects concept art, which again you would budget for. Depending on the type of approach, the production company may be asking you to come on board as a potential production partner. Now this is happening quite a lot, especially with independent films where they don't have a lot of money, but it's a visual effects heavy film. Lots of green screen. Maybe it's virtual environments, and they know that the best way to do this is to partner with a company, because of the budget they don't have to give out a big massive budget of VFX on its own. Now this could work. If you're a VFX company that's looking to get into the whole film production model and trying to get part payment up front and part payment through deferred points, or however deal you struck, this could be an interesting thing. Of course it's risky, because the film may bomb. No matter how great the storyline is, the film may bomb in the box office, or it may not make any money in return, and so it's always a big risk. So that's it's not something I would advise studios doing. But if you do have some sort of reserve, or or if the owners of the company have an aspiration to become producers, or you've got an opportunity to be very much involved in a film production, there's companies like Invisible in the UK, for example. They get involved in co-productions, which then they do it really well as well. In Digital Domain got involved with Ender's Game, and there's loads as well. So it's dependent on the circumstance of your company, but it's becoming quite a popular thing, especially with independent films, especially with video on demand. There's quite a much more big opportunity for making your money back now, whereas just relying on theatrical release. So it's worth thinking about that as well as a producer. Also, sometimes, like I said, they don't really give you much idea of the film or the story or the script. So just ask what sort of genre it is, or try to identify what genre is it. If it's sci-fi, is it horror, and that sort of thing. And the reason why is because if it's horror, then the movie is most likely going to be made, because horror films are quite popular to be made. Investors make their money back quite quick. Sci-fi, it's quite a big thing since Gravity, and with sci-fi it's quite popular, but again it's always seen a bit risky because of the amount of visual effects work required, hence why they're probably talking to you. Lastly, do a bit of research of those genres as well, because the last thing you want to do is, as a producer, and remember, I've said this in the earlier classes of this course, is as a VFX producer, you are the face of the company. You are representing the company from a sales point of view, from a production point of view, from client-facing point of view. So it's very important that you come in there clued up. So do a bit of research. If you know it's a horror film, or it's a slasher film, or it's found footage, then watch some of those films or do a bit of research. So when you go in there, the director or the producers will be referencing those sort of movies or those sort of styles, and you won't be in the dark too much, and the conversation become much more fluent. So it's very important. Okay, so a big part of your job in VFX management is reading scripts to bid on work, as we've just said in this lesson. So get familiar with feature film and TV scripts. The last thing you want to do is pick up a script and go, oh my god, this looks like this could be a nightmare to read. Or you might not be familiar with the format, things like scenes and shots and dialogue and so on. And so get familiar with that, and you can just go on these particular websites here, like dailyscript.com or Scriptorama, and there's loads, and just download these free scripts. They're feature film scripts. Some of them are really up to date as well, the latest films. Like first or second drafts. Or you can get sometimes shooting scripts on there. It's worth just getting your head around it. Download them, read them, get your head around the whole structure of scripts. Okay, so we're gonna pretty much start reading the script of drones. So we're gonna use this lesson to basically look at the script that I've provided you guys, and we're gonna read it. We're gonna break it down. We're gonna start filling in the spreadsheet. But before we do that, the first thing to do is, when you're reading the script for the first time, don't attempt to put down any ballpark figures right away. Just read the script. Just read it as you would be reading a book. Read it as if you're trying to, as an audience. Forget that you're doing a VFX breakdown. Just read the script for the story. It's very important that you get the story. Once you get the idea of the story, then do a second read. And this second read is when you start to identify where the VFX shots are. Now, if you're doing this, if you've done this quite a while, like me, I've read a lot of scripts, done a lot of breakdowns, then I tend to start identifying shots as I'm reading them. And to do that, I wouldn't go directly into my spreadsheet and start doing a full-blown breakdown or detailed VFX breakdown. I just start making notes, and there's several ways you can do that. So if I load up the script that you guys have as well. Okay, so this script you guys have, and so it depends what you're using, but you have things like you have this sort of tools in the preview of Mac or Adobe Acrobat PDF reader that lets you highlight things like that. So you can do highlights. You can change the color of stuff. So you can say red is for certain effects, blue is for certain effect, and you can do. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Wow. Okay. But you can do these sort of highlights. So that I tend to do that sometimes, just so I know red is for hard shots, blue easy shots maybe, or maybe blue special effects, red visual effects. It's up to you how you want to do that. Or sometimes what I do is, which is what I advise you guys to do in this lesson, is just create a simple spreadsheet like this, where it's simple 3-column pages, script, and VFX. This is something designed that you can just quickly fill in, really easy. You can do this anywhere. Okay, so then what I'll do is I have the script on one side. So if you have 2 monitors, you can have one monitor with the script and the other monitor with your spreadsheet. But I'm doing this on a laptop, and since most producers use laptops, it's a good idea. But what I would do is, as I would read it, I'll say, okay, this is page 1, script, and I'll say, right, we have an interior, large neon lit clinical spaced room known as the mainframe, and then the orb flickers on, we crash zoom into a display screen. So that's already, I can see that's being a VFX shot. So I'll highlight it, Control C, copy, and then paste that into my little cell. And in here, I would say, let's have a look at it. Orb flickers on, crash zoom into display screen, which starts display operating system boot up code before the words initializing IS programs displayed. So that's clearly going to be some sort of motion graphics design, motion graphics animation, and comp on screen. Really simple. This is obviously not a detailed breakdown, it's just enough notes for me to know, okay, that's a motion graphics shot. Then I'll go down to another one. And also, it's worth knowing, this is what I'm saying about, read a lot of scripts, because we're looking at page 1, but there's these numbers on the side. So for those of you who are not familiar with scripts, so for those of you who are, forgive me for this, for repeating something that you know already. For those who don't read much scripts, this is a script with scene numbers on. So each of these numbers here are scenes. So it's worth remembering that. And whenever you do a VFX breakdown, you reference the scene and the page. So this is, and also another thing as a producer worth mentioning is, if you have a client giving you a script and there's no scene numbers, just ask them to resend the script with scene numbers, because it will help do your breakdown a lot. Try not to break down a script without any scene numbers. It just becomes a nightmare. Also, it's just really hard to actually communicate your breakdown with the script to the client. So I always ask for scene numbers, and it's very easy to do in Final Draft. The client will be able to do that really quickly. Okay, so we go down and we'll just pick another scene. Let's just say scene 5, page 1, exterior, high above the city, street views, a close-up shot of a drone looking down at a busy city. So another thing's worth mentioning to you is when you do your breakdown, you're not just highlighting potential VFX shots, you're also generating questions. And every breakdown that I've done for years, I always end up having a list of questions. Like, for example, I'm reading this, a close-up shot of a drone. Question I would ask myself, as well as something I'll probably bring up the client, or when I chat to the VFX supervisor sign-on project, is are we doing this drone as a CG drone, or is this going to be a prop that's going to be on wire? What's it going to be? Or is it going to be a combination of both? So that's worth these sort of questions coming up. Or for example, like the operating room hospital, is this something that's going to be done in the studio, or is this going to be how futuristic is it? This is where concept art would come in really useful as well. So you generate as many questions. So don't be afraid to have a list of questions when you do your first read or your first breakdown. Okay, so for example, let's do the close-up drone looking down. So I'll assume that this drone is going to be CG because it's just looking down at a busy city. It's probably flying around. So, and also you can probably amend this as well. So this is page 1, but let's we can add another column. So another column here, and we can call this scene number. There we go. Let's make that bold, and we can say so this is scene 5, page 1. And we'll just take this close up here, copy, select, and paste. And for that, we're going to say the VFX for that is CG drone. There you go. And then you would do this through your whole session. So I'm not going to do every single thing. So as a homework, so I haven't set you guys homework for quite a while. So as part of your assignment for this class, I'd like you to take the script which I've supplied to you as part of your class, and I would like you to pretty much do this first read breakdown, which I think will be really fun for you guys to do. So yeah, so if you go through all of that, just do it. Don't do a detailed breakdown. Just do it as a first read. I want to see something as simple as that. In fact, you can also create another column here, and we can call it questions stroke assumptions. And you can put that here. That'll probably be your biggest column here. And you can put things like here, is this CGI or practical? Assume CGI. So it's something worth putting in there because as you're reading this, it's good to put down anything that comes to your head straight away. Put it in somewhere here, and then when you finish, you can always go on the phone to a client and chat to them. Or this is maybe something you can pass to your VFX supervisor to look at as well. So yeah, so this is a simple breakdown sheet. Another thing that's worth mentioning is whenever you get scripts, like I said, you may also get concept art. And if you don't, please do ask for the concept art. So here's an example of the concept art for drones. So this is what the concept art for drones look like. So you get loads of like research material. You'll get some like sometimes they're pulled from other films to give you an idea of what the environment, what the look they're after, because they haven't shot the film. And it gives you a good idea what sort of film it's going to be as well in terms of look. You can see that there's hundreds of these little drones. So already as a VFX person, you're thinking, okay, particles and simulation work required here. So you can see here lots of particle work. So it's going to be a heavy animation and particles dynamics. So you better have a good dynamics TD in your team to be able to do this sort of stuff. And you can see here there's a lot of motion graphics, kind of like Terminator type vision here. So you need a good motion graphics artist involved. So that's why it's always worth asking to look at mood boards, and then you can read the script with that in your mind. So that's one element. So what we've done just now. If I just load up my spreadsheet, this is what you call a simple breakdown. Okay, this is as simple as it gets. The next thing I'm going to show you now is what an actual visual effects breakdown looks like. So a typical VFX breakdown sheet looks like this. So you have your scene numbers, you have your page, you have your VFX number. So it's not necessary to generate a VFX number during the script, because that's all going to change anyway when you get the edit. But sometimes it's worth doing it if you're doing some tests, for example. It's worth having a VFX number so that when you're talking about a particular visual effects shot, you can reference that. But it's not necessary at this stage. Obviously the description, which you copy and paste from the script like you did on your really early initial ballpark. And then you have a column called plates production elements. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. There we go. Then you have your production elements. So this is stuff that you would shoot on set. So you know, I would advise to shoot the cave and set interior cave, have background plates shot, actors and wires for this shot. Then I have another column called digital elements. These are all the things I assume will need to be done on the computer because we can't do this for real. So this stuff like the CG model of a cockpit plane, the fuselage and the rock face, for example, and also the workflow. What I would see in terms of like how we would execute the shot. There'll be a lot of 3D animation, rendering, track, and comp, and that's it. And then you'll put a ballpark cost figure. I'll tell you how to get this figure in a minute. So that's your first page. And then the second page in the sheet is the assets. So you make a list of all the assets you would need. So for example, in this film, there's a massive plane. The plane is pretty much the central character of the film. So you'll have a lot of time put into building this plane. Then there might be other elements like involving, like, you know, may need some CG smoke, CG fire, or you may need to shoot some CG smoke and fire. But this is assets you need to build. Now, it's worth talking about assets because when you're working with TV episodic type work, these assets will be reused a lot. So, and usually the assets are costed differently. That's a separate page because the client may not want to pay for a certain asset. For example, if you put, say, I don't know, 20 days worth of modeling, texturing, shading, and so on for a particular car, and this car asset's only going to appear in 2 shots, the client may not feel like it's justified enough to be spending that amount of work or that amount of money on the asset. But if you do what I've got in the sheet here, where you put the asset and you put down all the scenes that you see that would use that asset, then the client would see that cost of not being too high because they'll say, oh, this is being used in a lot of shots, so its value is worth it. So that's why you have this separate page here called the asset breakdown. So you have your scenes, shot breakdown, and your asset breakdown. Then you have the summary. This is like the top sheet. To be honest with you, most clients go directly to this sheet first before looking at the detailed breakdown. And really, this is like the asset creation, the cost for that, how many shots are being broken down, the supervision. Supervision, again, is charged separately because, for example, you may include supervision as part of your bid, and the production company may end up paying for that from their production shoot cost, so it doesn't come as part of your bid. Or they may say, no, this included in your VFX bid, and you know, it's all part of what you're going to be invoicing us. So it's worth asking again, you know, like a lot of the production I've worked on for TV, for example, the production company would cover it. But on a feature film, that necessarily might not be the case. So it's all circumstantial. Then you have a total shot count. So this could be a 30 shot count film or a 100 shot count film. And it's interesting, this column. Over the years, I've realized studio production companies will look at it and go, oh wow, this is a big show. There's 100 shots to be done. So that's why they usually have this column. Then you have your total cost. And at the bottom here, I always have quote based on studio rates. So your studio rates range. You know, you have some studios charge £1,000 a day, or you know, close to $2,000 a day. It all depends on your studio rate and what, you know, the deal that you're cutting. Some studios have a rate card that they stick to, or you know, a lot of studios I work at, they tend to, like, you know, work out a deal, say, you know, we're gonna do this show at X amount of money for this particular client, or it's because we really want to work on this film. Or they may have a type of range of rates. They may have a commercials rate, a film rate, or an indie rate, a short film rate, you know, or big studio feature film rate. It depends. Or some studios charge rates based on like how long the project is. So if this is like a 2-week project, then they'll charge full whack rate. If this is a project that's going to give them at least 6 months worth of work, then they'll give a really good deal, or they'll reduce the rate in order to secure 6 months worth of work. So yeah, a lot of honesty production coming out in this class, but I think it's important that I am as honest as possible to you guys, so that you guys know the reality of visual effects production in, you know, from an experience point of view. So yeah, so this is what your sheet would look like. And then obviously you have the detailed breakdown sheet. So this is what a detailed breakdown sheet looks like. So you have your VFX ID. So this is where the so remember, if we go back here, remember I was saying you create a VFX number and it's not too necessary? Well, if you're doing a detailed VFX breakdown, this is where this VFX number comes in. So for example, you got VFX number here. So when you go to do your breakdown, you wouldn't want to put the page number and the scene number. You want to put down the VFX number. So for example, you got a VFX number here, and then I'll create different pipeline steps. Now it's very important you put these pipeline steps because this sheet is actually usually filled out with the visual effects supervisor sitting with the producer, or sometimes you just give this sheet to the lead, the lead artist, whether it's the lead 3D, lead comp, or the visual effects supervisors, or the senior artists in there to fill in. Or sometimes the supervisor will sit with the producer and the producer will fill that in. Or if you're a very experienced producer who's got experience with the whole pipeline nature of the visual effects pipeline, then you can fill that in yourself, and then you will double check those numbers with a lead or a VFX supervisor. With today's nature of visual effects, which is probably why this course exists on the FX PhDs, because it's quite common now for producers to be very savvy with the pipeline, like I said earlier in this course. Okay, so and then you just put in your days. So, this would be a 2-day, this would be 1 day, and a total would be 3 days. So you would do this. So it's, again, part of your assignment. I would love to see you guys upload your version of the breakdown onto the forum so I can have a look at it. So again, I've provided the sheet for you guys to do that, and you put down your days, and then what you do is, to get your total cost, you would then add up the total days, and then you'll multiply those total days with your studio rate, and you'll get the final cost number from that. And that's pretty much it, guys. So have a look at this. And again, I'm pretty sure on this one you're going to be asking lots of questions on the forums. I really encourage this, because I really want to get a lot of conversation going about this, because there isn't really a right and wrong way of doing breakdowns bids. I mean, there is a sort of like a format that you should stick to. And this is the sort of format you would stick to. You have your scene, page number, VFX description, and and so on. And then your VFX cost breakdown will involve all the pipeline steps, and you would have these sort of headings up there: the date, who created the quote, what sort of quote type is it? Is it a ballpark? Is it an accurate one? That's the format that's quite familiar throughout all the jobs and places I've worked at. But in terms of like the numbers you put in, it's all down to the studio you work at, the type of methodologies that your VFX supervisor may be suggesting to execute this shot on.